You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to more of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and hello to my UFL fans. It is time again, following another week of action, to rank all 8 teams from worst to first. We had a really big weekend. The playoffs have been just about solidified. We still have 2 teams battling it out in the XFL for the final remaining slot, but there is plenty to discuss. Make sure you comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts and opinions on this past weekend's games. How would you rank all 8 teams? And as a reminder, the merch store is now live. If you guys want to get a t-shirt similar to what I'm wearing, you are more than welcome to do so. Now, beginning with the very bottom of the league at number 8, a team that I have had here now for at least a month or so, that is going to be the Memphis Showboats. And I've got to say, I've felt a little bit vindicated in where I've had these guys ranked for the last, again, month or so on top of that, because I came into this matchup and I've seen a lot of people have Arlington ranked as the worst, maybe Memphis ranked above the Houston Roughnecks, and it just feels like, at least for the last month and a half, this Showboats team, especially defensively, has just completely lost it. And I don't really know what's going on with everything that is happening in Memphis right now, because those first couple of weeks, minus the collapse in the fourth quarter to the Brahmas, it really felt like this Showboats team could potentially be a pretty good unit. But now, after an afternoon filled with just offensive blunders and inability to protect the football, and just what was an overall mess of a game that was honestly further apart than the scoreboard would probably have you believe, the Memphis Showboats are probably, unless you have some other way to try to rationalize the Houston Roughnecks, which I just do not think they can be the bottom of the league at this point with how good their defense is, despite where the offense is right now, the Memphis Showboats are the bottom of the barrel in the UFL. Defense allowing a whopping 296 yards and 3 touchdowns to Luis Perez here. Running back Devian Smith from the Renegades as well, galloping for another 101 yards and a couple of touchdowns on the ground. Memphis now sits with a minus 88 point differential on the season, which is far and away the worst in the league. They're currently allowing 31 points per game on defense with this loss now, which is 6 points more than the team that is in 7th right now, which is Arlington, sitting at 25 points per game. I don't really know what the answer is for Memphis going forward, because they came in with a lot of excitement, a lot of hype around them, just considering the amount of additions they made to this team following the merger, and just the way the supplemental drafts and the remaining players all distributed out to the teams following that initial draft and into the second one. There's so much talent on this team, and for this team to have just gone down the tubes the way it has, you have to wonder what's going on there. But I would assume, and I don't really think this is too far of a stretch, we're probably going to see some drastic changes with the Memphis Showboats going into next season. So with that, a game where you lose 47-23, and again, it was a score that was probably a lot further apart than, or a lot closer than it should have been, and because like at one point it was literally 39-9 towards the end of the third quarter, and Memphis just kind of got some garbage time points on the board. I don't know where the Memphis Showboats go from here, but I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. Coming in at number 7, we have ourselves the Houston Roughnecks. Again, the other one-win team in the league right now that I do think belongs above the Memphis Showboats here. Despite all of their offensive woes, the Houston Roughnecks defense just continues to fight week in and week out, and honestly be a consistent challenge for just about everyone they've gone against. Again, keyword just about there. Words, I should say. But it does not matter if your offense is basically stuck in neutral. It basically took them the entire game to choke this one away, and it was really unfortunate with how things turned out, because you have the opportunity to maybe potentially put more than just 3 points on the board, but the offense has to settle field goal after field goal after field goal, totaling 4 on the day, and then you have yourself a disastrous fumble on a kickoff late in the fourth quarter that ultimately costs you the game, puts the Brahmas in a position to kick the game-winning field goal. My score prediction for this actual matchup was 16-13 Brahmas. The final score wound up being 15-12. It was about essentially the exact type of matchup I expected. Two really good defenses going head-to-head, where there's clearly a lot more concern surrounding the San Antonio Brahmas offense than I think has been discussed to this point now. And of course, you had a Roughnecks offense that just literally cannot do anything. And I hate that, because when you look at what the defense did, completely snuffing out the run. John Lovett, who's been having himself some pretty good games over the last few weeks, completely eliminated. Quentin Dormady forced his way to the bench. Another positive for this defense here. And you did everything that you could to force turnover after turnover after turnover, to play spoiler to San Antonio's season. But the unfortunate reality is that this offense is bad, and it is the worst in the UFL by I would say a pretty wide margin. Like, yeah, maybe San Antonio is potentially flirting with that as well because of just the way they've looked the last few weeks, but at least they've been able to run the football. And yeah, they struggled this week, but Houston has one of the best run defenses in the UFL, and that's been like a week in, week out type of thing. So I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I genuinely feel for this Roughnecks defense. And again, another team that come season end, I'm expecting to see some reshuffling going on with the coaching staff and who is on this roster going into next season here. I'm very interested in some of the changes that are going to be made, both here in Houston and with the Showboats, as we were discussing previously, because, again, week in and week out, regardless of how bad the offense has been, this defense has come in, and they've come in and played every single week, and they have kept Houston in a lot of games and even contributed in scoring points in some of those games to keep them all so close. But when your offense is falling flat week in, week out, you can't protect your quarterback. Was it 6 sacks they allowed this weekend? They were 5 for 13 on third down. You were averaging 3.8 yards per play. Something's got to change on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm hoping that we see those changes happen sooner rather than later in the offseason so things can, get a nice reset as early as possible in Houston, because something has to change on offense there. Moving into the number 6 spot here, we have the Arlington Renegades. And you will notice, if you were here last week, so far, no changes in the power rankings. Everyone's sitting where they are. I feel very confident in the way my power rankings have been set up the last few weeks, barring like a swap between a couple teams here or there the last few weeks. But the Arlington Renegades, 1-6, getting their first victory of the season. 4-6 may not be a good enough record to get you into the playoffs this year, but you do still have hope to potentially at least get back to that record if this was the turnaround you needed. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but maybe this was get a little bit of your swagger back late in the season type of thing, and maybe Arlington can rip off another win or two, maybe even finish out the season with some wins and hopefully play spoiler to some teams here. We'll see, but I'm not going to bank on it. But I will say, hats off to this Arlington Renegades team, because you come in, you basically capitalize on a Showboats team that has been down and out for quite some time right now. Luis Perez torching Memphis while throwing basically picnics in the pocket because he had all day to play. Like, he really had nothing to worry about while he was sitting in the pocket dropping back. 5 of their wide receivers managed 4 catches or more on the day. The offense finished averaging 7.5 yards per play. They only failed a third down conversion twice out of the 8 attempts they had, and they finished with a total of 24 first downs on the day. Like, this offense was just steamrolling. And the unfortunate thing of this game, and it's not really unfortunate, but when you look at it in just retrospect to the entire season, the unfortunate thing is that this defense that we got this week was so good. And if that was the defense that you've had from Arlington week in and week out throughout the duration of this season, they're probably battling for a playoff spot rather than sitting at 1-6 eliminated from the playoffs. For them to come in and basically play the way they did, and again, I know the Memphis Showboats are struggling, says a lot about just how much fight this team does have left in the tank and the pride that they still have in what they're trying to do on the football field. Donald Payne leading the way. He had 6 tackles, a tackle for loss, a sack, and a forced fumble that helped lead this defense to this dominant display. There was 5 different drives for the Memphis Showboats that ended in turnovers, whether that was on downs or through means of taking the football away from the Memphis Showboats. I've just been so impressed with what they did in this game here, and even like just going back and watching it just felt like they could do no wrong. While the final score may have had 23 points on the board for the Memphis Showboats here, I mean, I'm not even going to really hold that against Arlington because you sat there and basically smacked around your opponent for nearly 45 minutes of the game. At some point, you might get a little bit tired of it and then kind of lay off in the end. So garbage time points are garbage time points. This was a phenomenal game from Arlington. And again, it's just unfortunate that it took this long in the season for something like this to happen, because if we were getting something even just similar to this, not exactly this, because this was a phenomenal display, if it was even somewhat like this, you would have had yourself another playoff contender in the XFL conference, in my opinion, because the offense over there in Arlington has been pretty good for a large majority of the season. Like they've had a few games where they've maybe sputtered, but they've been a pretty consistently good offense with Luis Perez leading the way there. Moving into number 5, dropping back down after slipping up into the top half of the league last week, the DC Defenders find themselves back in this number 5 position that they've found themselves in quite a bit this season on my power rankings personally. They're not out of the playoff race. There's obviously still hope, but this loss this week, and a crushing one at that, just with all things considered and how this game played out for them, is going to make it very unlikely that they find themselves in the playoffs. There's still a chance, but I will say that those chances are slim in my opinion. Jordan Te'amu obviously got knocked out of the game, and then when Jalen McClendon came in, things didn't really get that much better. The offense just overall was not really doing much for me. I mean, you got that 70-yard score early from Ty Scott when coming from Jordan Te'amu there, and beyond that one big explosive play, like the offense was just kind of dead in the water. Like it did not really do a whole lot here. The run was basically a non-factor in this matchup here. If Kiki Kuti doesn't rip that 28-yard run, I mean, you're basically looking at 12 total carries with 30 yards on the day. So it's like there really was just not a whole lot going on offensively, and this has kind of been the issue. Just very inconsistent offensive play coming from the DC Defenders all season long, not even just this game, but it's been a season-wide problem. And, maybe you could argue that they were starting to find a spark, but I don't really know if that spark's still going to be there coming out of this game here. And then defensively, it really was not much better for DC as well. They are the league's worst run defense, and they are by a fairly decent margin at this point, and they looked every bit of that part this week. Matt Colburn, basically, I honestly feel like if he wanted to, could have jogged his way to at least 100 yards with the way this run defense was playing against him. I think he averaged like 8.7 yards per carry. It's somewhere in my notes here, but I mean, again, could have jogged his way to 100 yards if he had really wanted to. And, I'll give them some credit for tightening up late in the second half. They definitely shut down Michigan in those final 4 drives there. It was just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. But it kind of a little too late at that point, basically, because your offense still isn't doing anything. You muster up like a field goal late in the game to make the score a little bit better. But, I mean, minus that 70-yard touchdown, you're basically looking at like a 3-point game for DC. Again, I'm not going to take points off the board and say they're worse than they are. They did get the touchdown, but you're 170-yard play away from looking at a 3-point game for your offense. So it's been a team that's struggled all season long with DC, and it's consistency. It really is. Because there are weeks where this team looks much better than other weeks, and this was another one of those weeks where they just took a downhill spiral, and it just did not look good. So, again, they're still in the playoff conversation, but with the records that both St. Louis and San Antonio is sitting at right now, I don't really know how DC is going to find their way in. Like, you're going to need a pretty big collapse from San Antonio to basically drop the rest of their games. And at this point, you need DC to win out. So that's kind of the situation we're looking at right now. And that's not really what I foresee. I don't really see that right now. So I understand they're still in the playoff race, but tough spot for DC to be in right now. Moving into the top half of the league now, we're going into number 4 here, and we are looking at the 5-2 San Antonio Brahmas. And I'm going to be honest with you, having them at number 4 feels weird because based off the way that they have been playing as of late, you could argue they probably deserve to be lower. But when you look at the teams they're above, I don't really know how you could rationalize putting them any lower than those other teams. I will say, way too close for comfort matchup against a Houston team that, again, I expected to come in and give them a fight defensively, but I didn't expect them to downright basically eliminate them for the majority of the game, and it takes some late game theatrics to ultimately steal a victory here. But a win is a win, so, take that for what you will. QB position now is definitely up in the air with Kevin Hogan coming in to replace Quentin Dormady. At this point here, it kind of feels like Dormady may have lost his starting role, and I don't really know if Kevin Hogan's going to be the answer either, because he damn near threw the game away himself with a near interception on the sideline. So I think San Antonio fans, cross your fingers, say your prayers, and let's hope to see Chase Garbers maybe make his way back potentially. I don't know if that's still likely or not. I know that there was the conversation of like if they make the playoffs, it might be possible for him to return then. So hopefully San Antonio can hang on and we get Chase Garbers sooner than anticipated over in San Antonio, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But that seems like kind of what you need to be holding out your hope for. I did anticipate a bit of a struggle against Houston's run defense here because they have, again, been very good for a large majority of the season, but like I didn't expect them to get flat out shut down. It took them 27 total carries to move 73 yards. It's an average of 2.7 yards per carry. So I had seen the way John Lovett had been kind of flashing. It felt like every other week or so, give or take, or even on the weeks where he wasn't necessarily flashing, he was still having solid performances. I thought maybe he would test that defense a little bit more, but I was very surprised at just how much they actually struggled here. And this game ultimately comes down to just what San Antonio is right now, which is a team with a very, very good defense that is very opportunistic, but also on top of that, it's apparently spreading a little bit over to the special teams now as well, because if it wasn't for some opportunistic plays, San Antonio potentially lets this matchup slip away, and DC's opportunity to maybe steal a playoff spot looks a lot brighter going into this week. The defense, though, was disruptive all game long. Linebacker Devontae Beckett, man. You want to talk about a guy that was just hungry for the football. 9 tackles, 2 TFLs, sack and a half, leading a defense that finished the day with 6 sacks, 8 total tackles for loss, and allowing only 185 total yards of offense on the day. But you got to give it to Bryce Thompson, man. I mean, to come in a situation where you're in basically you got to have it mode. You want to win this game. You want to win this game now. Avoid the overtime stipulation. You got to get the football right here, right now, and he did just that, stripping the football on the kickoff, and ultimately puts this team in position to get themselves a field goal, steal a victory. They're 5-2. The way they are playing right now, though, and the way they're winning football games does not feel sustainable, in my opinion, and I feel like they are, if Chase Garbers does not come back, and this is the way the offense looks going forward, it feels like they're racing towards a first-round exit against St. Louis. So we'll see how this shakes out, but I'm expecting basically right now Birmingham, Michigan, and then St. Louis, San Antonio, barring some unforeseen collapse from San Antonio's end. And it feels like they're racing towards an exit straight out of St. Louis initially. So we'll see how that shakes out. But offense has got to pick it up during these final few weeks for me to really take San Antonio serious. Like, I know their defense is really good. Don't get me wrong. And defense does win championships. Like, I get that. But not when your offense is struggling the way San Antonio's has been since basically losing Chase Garbers. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we're looking at the Michigan Panthers, now sitting at 5-2, 22-9 victory, very comfortable win. Never really felt like DC was going to come back and win that game, in my opinion. And the conversation surrounding Michigan for the last few weeks with Jake Bates essentially being like the hero in Michigan right now does not seem like it's going to change anytime soon. There's been a lot of noise surrounding Michigan and just how much they are relying on their kicker right now to put points on the board. And I understand the fear in that. You know, it is scary that you're relying on a kicker to put all these points on the board for you. And I do think, you know, Michigan needs to really work on getting in the end zone more, because you could be winning far more comfortably and not forcing Jake Bates to be this hero, but knocking in another 3 field goals for Michigan, securing their lead, securing a victory over DC. You got to love it for at least Jake Bates. And again, you know, whether you're concerned about it or not, I'll leave that up to you, but it's definitely something worth at least discussing here, and I don't think that discussion is going to go away anytime soon with just how many field goals it feels like we're seeing from Jake Bates every single week. I will say that I was very happy to see Michigan run the football the way they did when I was doing my preview for their matchup. I was stressing, run the football. You're going up against the league's worst run defense by a significant margin in DC, and to see Matt Colburn come in, remind everyone what he's able to do. 16 carries, 137 yards. It was 8.7 yards per attempt. And then Wes Hills netting another 37 yards and a touchdown to boot on top of that. This is a really threatening running back room, and I think one that people really need to respect here, especially with the way spring football kind of works. You are playing in a spot right now where it's getting very hot, very quickly right now. We are approaching June. We're nearly halfway. We're basically halfway through May. It's the 13th right now. It's going to start getting a lot hotter. These track meet style offenses where everyone's slicing and dicing through the air is going to slow down at some point. And one of the best ways to wear down a defense is running the football. Michigan does have the makings to potentially be a team that could make a push, and they could do it through a ground and pound style as the heat starts to really pick up as we push into June, because those playoffs are going to be done during that first and second week of June, and it gets very hot in Birmingham. It gets hot. Oh, I know St. Louis is in a dome, but it does get hot in these later portions of the season. And so some of these games they have outdoors that are further down south. This is a team that can threaten their opponents just simply off the idea of completely ground and pounding their way to victory. So don't be too surprised if we're seeing more of this come from Michigan over the next few weeks, especially with quarterback health kind of being an issue right now in Michigan. We saw 2 new quarterbacks playing for them this past weekend in Brian Lewerke and Bryce Perkins. And I will say, I'm definitely curious to see if Bryce Perkins continues to get more of an opportunity, or if maybe he just kind of lucked out with the defense not being able to prepare to play against him. Whatever the situation may be, that is something worth keeping an eye on. But with a running back room that consists of Matt Colburn and Wes Hills, 2 guys that have been very capable starters as a running back and have been a very awesome duo to watch this season, don't be surprised if Michigan starts to fall in love with running the football and just running it down people's throats, because I do think with the way this heat's going to start picking up over the last month or so of the UFL season, you have an opportunity to just completely wear down some defenses. And defensively, on top of that, this Michigan Panthers unit, if they play like this and continue to do so, and they have been for a decent amount of time, they've had a game or two where maybe they're not quite at the level they played this past weekend, but this is a defense minus Frank Ginda that, again, was a 70-yard score away from allowing only 3 points and just completely dominating their DC defender opponents here. This defense flexing at muscles, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, takeaway on the day as well. Safety Kai Nakua, at this point, seems to have a harder time not finding the football than finding a football. 8 more tackles on the week. He now leads the team with 43. He is in the top 10 at number 10 in tackles as a safety. Definitely worth noting there. Breland Speaks, even if he's not making as many plays this week as he is some other weeks, he's still in there, dominating offensive lines, making a statement or 2 per game, continuing to be a menace up front. There is just so much with how good the defense is over there and what we've seen from the Michigan Panthers defense this season. Keep in mind, they kept a very close game against a Birmingham Stallions offense that has been just kind of galloping, pun intended, all over opponents' defenses. This is a unit to not sleep on. Do I think they can beat the Birmingham Stallions? I'm not 100% positive on it. Is there certainly a possibility if things break the right way with the way that defense looks and the way that run game works? Absolutely. There is a possibility. But do not sleep on what the Panthers have going for them. Coming in at number 2, obviously, it's got to be the St. Louis Battlehawks. I've got to say, it was very fun watching social media, comment sections just light up honestly in the lead up to this game, during this game, and after this game here. There are very clearly some impassioned fans that love them some St. Louis Battlehawks and or them some Birmingham Stallions here. I have not seen conversation like this since basically the NFL season and people going back and forth through the lead up of the playoffs. And I love every second of it. This is the type of passion. This is the reason why I do what I do and cover even something like a spring football league. It's that type of stuff right there. So many sour grapes, a lot of boisterous, ha ha ha, we win type of stuff going on. I know it can be a little bit toxic, but it's always fun to watch from afar. Valiant effort from St. Louis, though. I have got to give them props. You are not going to get a ha-ha boo-hoo, USFL over XFL from me. Even if I am a USFL guy, I will tip my cap and say hats off to what the Battlehawks did in this matchup here, because they absolutely took it to the Stallions every step of the way. A big slip up that led to an interception paired with a decent amount of drops from some wide receivers wound up being pretty crucial in this game for St. Louis. If it wasn't for that interception, that goes 3 plays and a touchdown later for Birmingham, coupled with some key drops here and there, there's a good opportunity that St. Louis ends up winning this football game here. Birmingham's run defense, though, clearly a problem, and that is definitely something that St. Louis has to figure out if they expect to be playing the Birmingham Stallions in 5 weeks come Championship Sunday. That is definitely something you have to think about and try to figure out over the coming weeks and kind of get sorted out here. Their run defense, best in the league by far, and if it wasn't for a 23-yard carry by A.J. McCarron, you're basically looking at 41 total yards of rushing from the rest of your unit. So just something that you have to think about. You cannot beat the Birmingham Stallions as a one-dimensional offense. There's no way that's going to happen. And I know their run defense is as good as they come. I get it. I do. But you've got to find a way to break things open and get some more runs for a decent amount of gains more consistently. I will say I was impressed with St. Louis's offensive line in this matchup for a unit that comes in missing a couple of guys going into the matchup. Did a good job weathering the storm, only allowing a couple of sacks. There definitely was some pressure involved in there, but to keep A.J. McCarron upright for a large majority of the game, you definitely have to tip your cap to that as well. But really the failures of St. Louis come defensively in this matchup here. For a defense that has been really good for a decent portion of the season, their weakness, though, is dealing with teams that know how to run the football. And if there's one team that knows how to run the football in the UFL, it is the Birmingham Stallions. If it was not for Ramiz Ahmed missing a field goal, in the third quarter, you're basically looking at 6 straight scoring drives for Birmingham. And we're talking drives that went for 13 plays, 9 plays, 7 plays, 15 plays, and then a big 40-yard score as well to cap off those drives there. And on top of that, 349 yards of total offense, 4 touchdowns. I understand it, though. Birmingham has so much talent. But if this was like an expose of what the St. Louis Battlehawks defense actually is going up against arguably the best offense in the UFL, you kind of have yourselves a problem, because Birmingham themselves did not necessarily play perfect, and you didn't capitalize enough on that. There were mistakes to be made and things to be, to take away from them. But despite all the struggles, despite, what was a good performance, but clearly not quite good enough against a juggernaut of a Birmingham Stallions team, I will, again, give St. Louis credit for putting up a good fight. It's going to take far more discipline, a more balanced game plan, and you cannot just throw the world on A.J. McCarron's shoulders. I know it's been a fun thing to kind of watch the Battlehawks do all season long, but the Birmingham Stallions are back-to-back USFL champs for a reason. Whether you want to try to say lesser competition or not, that's not the conversation I'm having here. You win championships for a reason, and they're very much so racing their way to a three-peat. You cannot come in just expecting A.J. McCarron to beat you with his arm. That offense has got to be more balanced. You've got to control the football far more consistently. Keep it out of the Stallions' offense's hands, clearly, because I don't know if this defense matches up well with what Birmingham is able to do. They just have way too much star power, which, of course, leads me to my number one team now, the Stallions themselves. I don't really know how you could argue them not being number one right now. 7-0, they haven't lost in a year. I think their streak is was it 12, 13, 14 in a row, something like that if you're counting playoff games? I don't know. The number's kind of crazy right now, but they are on a spring football tear, and they are on a run of a lifetime, of a generation right now with the way things are going. And I was impressed with the struggles that they had, the drops that they were having, some of the miscues they had on offense. For them to continue to just play and find ways to win, you got to tip your cap to what they're doing over there in Birmingham. I mean, Adrian Martinez is just an absolute headache for defenses. For him to come in, throw for 230 yards, 3 touchdowns, you got to worry about him taking off with the football because he ran 7 times for 60 yards on top of that. It just opens up everything. And I was so glad to see, because going into my preview for that game, I talked about, I don't want Birmingham to forget who they are as an offense, which is a team that, yes, they can throw the football with the best of them, clearly. However, they are a team that should be killing defenses on the ground with just how good they are at running the football, whether it's with their quarterback or with just the running back, what trio they have going on over there at this point now, because they even when CJ Marable was missing time, you had people stepping up and filling in pretty effectively. There is so much talent for you to work with when it comes to running the ball. The offensive line is so damn good. You come into this game 144 yards on the ground, averaging 5.5 yards per attempt. This is a team that just can overwhelm defenses every single week. And no matter who your focus is in trying to take out, somebody else is probably going to burn you. You had 3 different receivers catch a touchdown pass from Martinez in this matchup here. It did not matter who he was going to. He was finding people open in the end zone, and if he wasn't finding someone open to throw the football to, he was killing you on the ground, or the running backs were killing you on the ground. There's just way too many threats on this offense right now. Defensively, I will say this was probably the most I've seen the Birmingham Stallions struggle on defense in quite some time, even maybe dating back to like the USFL last year. St. Louis still managed 26 points altogether. They did a good job keeping the running backs in check, as I mentioned earlier. I think it was like 41 yards, or maybe even a little bit less, because Wayne Gallman got knocked back for like 6 yards or something like that on a carry. So they did an excellent job of just holding the running backs in check. And for someone like Jacob Sailors, who's been kind of torching some defenses when he's had the opportunity to do so, speaks volumes to just how good that run defense actually is over there in Birmingham. Hakeem Butler, even though he basically still got his in this matchup because he caught 7 catches for 89 yards and a 44-yard long of the day, you did a great job in minimizing everyone else, which was kind of how I expected this to go. Like, you can allow Hakeem Butler to maybe burn you on a few plays here and there, but take care of everyone else, and they did a great job of doing that. Darius Shepard and Ja'Cour Pearson altogether combining for 5 catches and 31 yards. Like, are you kidding me? Only 5 receivers caught a pass from that St. Louis offense here. So, big test this weekend for the Birmingham Stallions defense. I think they did a good job. I wouldn't say a great job, because you did still let them move in some instances here, and there were some just boneheaded defensive mistakes and penalties and things like that, I feel like you can't say this was a great game by the defense, but I do think it was good. All things considered, you definitely caught some lucky breaks, as I had mentioned earlier about, with the St. Louis Battlehawks offense and some of the mistakes and issues that led to drops, interception, obviously. So there were some breaks, but now you look towards the remainder of the season. You have to see, can we go undefeated? Can we make it to the championship? And can we now beat St. Louis, if it ends up being St. Louis on the XFL side, in St. Louis for a championship game? That is the big question now. So Birmingham has basically done everything they've needed to do to silence any doubters or critics. The big question now is, can you make it a three-peat? Can you do it undefeated? And if you can't do it undefeated, at least get the three-peat done. And can you get it done if you're in St. Louis taking on the Battlehawks? That is the big question there, because you have to wonder how much home field advantage in St. Louis would make a difference in that very same matchup. I'm very curious, and I'm hoping that we see, come the middle of June, another St. Louis-Birmingham matchup here, because it'd be a damn shame if this was the only game we got, because it was by far the best game we've had this season. But those are my power rankings for the UFL coming out of week number 7 and heading into week number 8. Let me know in the comment section down below your thoughts on the power rankings. Do you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on this past weekend's games? Let me know. But that is it for me. As always, greatly appreciate it if you made it to the end. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.